Santi Quattro Coronati is an ancient basilica in Rome, Italy. The church dates back to the 4th century, and is devoted to 4 anonymous saints and martyrs. The complex of the basilica with its 2 courtyards, the fortified Cardinal Palace with the St. Sylvester Chapel, and the monastery with its cosmotesque cloister is built in a silent and green part of Rome, between the Colosseum and San Giovanni in Laterano. In an out-of-time setting, the Santi Quattro Coronati. Santi Quattro Coronati means the 4 holy crowned ones, i.e., martyrs, and refers to the fact that the saints' names are not known, and therefore referred to with their number, and that they were martyrs. Since the crown, together to the branches of palm, is an ancient symbol of martyrdom. According to the Passion of Saint Sebastian, the 4 saints were soldiers who refused to sacrifice to Aesculapius, and therefore were killed by order of Emperor Diocletian. The bodies of the martyrs were buried in the cemetery of Santi Marcellino e Pietro, on the 4th mile of Via Labicana, by Pope Miltiades and Saint Sebastian. Miltiades decided that the martyrs should be venerated with the names of Claudius, Nicostratus, Sempronianus and Castorius. These names, together to a 5th Simplicius, were those of 5 Pannonian martyr stonemasons. These martyrs were later identified with the 4 martyrs from Albano, Secundus, Severianus, Carpophorus and Victorinus. The bodies of the martyrs are kept in 4 ancient sarcophagi in the crypt. According to a lapid dated 1123, the head of one of the 4 martyrs is buried in Santa Maria in Cosmedine. History. Tradition holds the first church was begun by Pope Miltiades, in the 4th century on the north side of the Coelian Hill, one of the first churches of Rome. It bore the titular Aemilianare from the name of the foundress, who probably owned the elaborate Roman villa, whose structure is evident under the church. The church was completed the end of the 6th century, and because of its proximity to the medieval papal residence of the Lateran Palace, it became prominent in its day. The first renovations occurred under Pope Leo IV, who built the crypt under the nave, added to side aisles, enclosed the courtyard before the facade, and built the bell tower and the chapels of Saints Barbara and Nicholas. The new remarkable basilica, Carolingian in style, was 95 meters long and 50 meters wide. This church, however, was burned to the ground by Robert Guiscard's troops during the Norman sack of Rome. Instead of rebuilding the original basilica to scale, Pope Paschal II built a smaller basilica with 2 courtyards, one in front of the other, the first corresponding to the original 9th century courtyard, while the second was sited over the initial part of the nave. The 2 aisles were included in the Cardinal Palace and in the Benedictine monastery founded by Paschal himself. The original apse of the basilica, however, was preserved, and seems oversized for the new church, whose nave was divided into 3 parts by means of columns. The new church was consecrated on the 20th of January 1116. In 1338 it was a possession of the Sassoviva Abbey. In the 13th century a cosmotesque cloister was added. The Cardinal Palace was enlarged by Cardinal Stefano Conti, a nephew of Pope Innocent III. Cardinal Conti also transformed the palace into a fortress, to shelter popes in the Lateran during the conflict with the Hohenstaufen emperors. In 1247, the chapel of St. Sylvester, on the ground floor of the fortress, was consecrated. It contains frescoes depicting the stories of Pope Sylvester I and Emperor Constantine I, among which the unhistorical baptism of the emperor, as well as a depiction of the donation of Constantine, painted in the backdrop of political struggles between Pope Innocent IV and the freshly excommunicated Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II. The frescoes are meant to underscore the desired sovereignty of the Church over the empire. When the popes moved to Avignon, the Cardinal Palace fell into ruin. Thus, upon the return of the popes to Rome with Pope Martin V, a restoration was necessary. However, when the papal residence moved from the Lateran to the Vatican Palace, this basilica lost importance. In 1564, Pope Pius IV entrusted the basilica and the surrounding buildings to the Augustinians, who still serve it. Once the building became an orphanage, the Augustinian nuns put a revolving drum by its entrance which was used as a deposit box for unwanted babies. Interior decoration. The apse contains the frescoes by Giovanni da San Giovanni of the four patron martyr saints, Severo, Severiano, Carpoforo e Vittorino. The altarpiece on the left nave of S. Sebastiano curator da Lucina e Irene was painted by Giovanni Baglioni. The second courtyard holds the entrance to the Oratorio di San Silvestro, with frescoes of medieval origin, as well as others by Raffaellino da Reggio. Titulus. Santi Quattro Coronati belongs to the titular churches of Rome from at least the end of 6th century. The current cardinal priest of the titular sesses, Quattro Coronatorum, is Cardinal Roger Mahony, Archbishop Emeritus of Los Angeles. Among the previous titulars are Pope Leo IV, King Henry of Portugal, who, in 1580, donated the magnificent wooden ceiling, and Pope Benedict XV. The full list is known only from the pontificate of Gregory VII. Fortunato, Terovano, Constantino, Leo, Leonino, Stefano, Teofilato, Giovanni, Herman of Brescia, Agostino, Benedetto of Terramaggiore, Guillaume de Court, Osist, Pierre Etier, Jean de Dormans, Hughes de Montelez, Demetrius, Jean de Neufchâtel, Francesco Augustione, Louis de Luxembourg, Alfonso Borja, Luis Juan del Miller y Borja, Lorenzo Pucci, Antonio Pucci, Roberto Pucci, Enrique de Portugal, Giovanni Antonio Facchinetti, Giovanni Antonio Facchinetti de Neus, Giovanni Gazia Millini, Girolamo Verdoni, Francesco Boncompagna, Cesare Facchinetti, Francesco Albizzi, Sebastiano Antonio Tanara, Giovanni Patrici, Alessandro Aldobrandini, Joaquin Fernandez Portocarrero, Giovanni Battista Mesmer, Carlo Francesco Giorini, Christoph Anton von Migazzi von Walundsson and Thurn, Lodovico Micara, OFM Cap, Giovanni Soliaceroni, Antonino Saverio de Luca, Americo Ferreira dos Santos Silva, Pietro Respire, Giacomo della Chiesa, Victoriano Gaise Sala Menende, Carl Joseph Schult, Norman Thomas Gilroy, Julians Vivards, Roger Michael Mahoney. Discovered frescoes. In 2002, art historian Andrina Draghi discovered an amazing display of frescoes, dating back to 13th century, while restoring the Gothic hall of the monastery. Most of the scenes were well preserved under a thick layer of plaster, and represented the 12 months, the liberal arts, the 4 seasons and the zodiac. The image of King Solomon, a pious and a judge, painted on the northern wall led scholars to argue the room was meant to be a hall of justice. Plaster was possibly laid after 1348 Black Death for hygienical reasons, or perhaps in the 15th century, when the Camaldolese left the monastery.